Hello.
Can we draw a parallel comparison between the Rohingya in Myanmar with, for example, the Tamil Tigers in Sri Lanka or the civil strife within the former Yugoslavia Federation?
Well, so I think you have said very correctly about the Tamil Tigers in Sri Lanka. This was a terror group that frankly hid behind the Tamil population. The Tamil population is a largely peaceful population, but the LTTE was a gang of terrorists, and they would always put forward the view that they represented the Tamil people. In the same way, you have a very ultra-radical group in the Rohingya who have been carrying on an armed struggle against the Burmese state. And what do they want? They want an independent Wahhabi state. They say that as Wahhabis, they cannot continue in a state that is majority Buddhist. So this is the dilemma facing Aung San Suu Kyi. And I'm sorry to say, many of the countries that are urging Aung San Suu Kyi to turn a blind eye to this fact are actually creating a situation in which terrorism can thrive in Myanmar.
Well, it's pretty easy to turn around the finger pointing. Professor Nalapat, let me go back to Professor Nalapat again. Prime Minister Modi refused to criticize Aung San Suu Kyi or the military in Myanmar during his short official visit to Myanmar. But after he returned from Myanmar, he urged Aung San Suu Kyi to speak out and to criticize the bloody crackdown on the Rohingya rebellion. Why do we have this difference in the attitude of Prime Minister Modi?
Well, the Indian spokesperson in India basically said that the issue should be settled in a way which meets the tenets of justice. And let me remind you that Myanmar is not the only country in that region where this kind of a struggle is going on. You're seeing it in the Philippines, for example, in Marawi. You're seeing it in Thailand. You have seen it in parts of India. So in all these places, unfortunately, this kind of an armed struggle has been going on, and these groups are in fact networked with each other. They are close to each other, and basically their point is they want separate states. They don't want to live with the majority of people. They would like to live in a separate state where you can follow a very ultra-extreme view of theology and laws which very frankly do not belong to the 21st century.
Let me turn to commentator in Myanmar, Mr. Yokuku. Hello.
Hello, yes.
What can you tell us about the latest?
Hello?
Hello, what can you tell us about the latest in your country, the military actions, as well as the tidal wave of the asylum seekers, whose number was put at 300,000? I mean, this is indeed an enormous catastrophe for the international society, which has been following the catastrophe there.
Okay. I think also world may understand or may not understand or pretend not to understand about this issue. They are telling off ethnic cleansing. Before I make a try to say no, I'm sure that putting the word ethnic cleansing is initially wrong, because they are not our ethnic. How can you say this is ethnic cleansing? This is not the ethnic issue. This is not religious issue. And this is just an illegal migration. We call them Bengali. Their origin are from Bangladesh. They are not Myanmar. They are not our citizens. They are foreigners. Please show me, is there any countries which allow illegal entry of foreigners for the sake of so-called human rights? I can say that there is no ethnic cleansing, no genocide. This is anti-terrorist action. This is a counter to terror acts.
Thank you so much.
Please.
Thank you, Yokoko, for being with us. Well, obviously, what he says reflects their understanding about the national identity of Rohingya. They don't call them the citizens of Myanmar, but just
Bengali.
Bengali.
Yeah.
Well, this has caused a lot of debates, not only in Myanmar, but for those who observe the political process there. What do you think of the plight of the Rohingya? Are they really Bengali?
Well, this is the view. Obviously, this is the majority view in Myanmar. I think the government and also the majority of the Buddhists living in that country, that they call them a Bengali. They were even offended, like early last year, by the use of Rohingya in the Western media. They once launched a small-scale demonstration against in front of the U.S. embassy, saying that you should stop using the Rohingya because Bengali means illegal immigrants from Bangladesh. That's what they call. They say this is their actual situation, their actual, actually who they are. That is obviously a bigger problem. Citizens not only stateless, you're living here, but you don't have a citizenship.
Rick, rivalry arising from ethnic tensions also broke out now and then in India,
Right.
where you have millions of Muslims, to say nothing of the three major conflicts between Pakistan and India ever since the partition in the 1940s. So what do you think of the root cause behind the escalation of tensions in Myanmar?
Well, if you're talking root cause, it almost always goes back to the British Empire and between India and Burma and the British Empire were just lines on the map. And then after the decolonization period, you had Muslim areas, and then you had which were carved into East Pakistan and West Pakistan, and then East Pakistan became Bangladesh. That's a long way of saying that you have a history of this. 15% of India is Muslim, but there has been ethnic strife since the creation of India. There was what was called ethnic cleansing in Pakistan at the time of the partition of India, and this is not directly related, but it's the root cause. I think a major issue here is that you have a lot of people I would call non-combatants, women, children, and you have serious allegations of the military burning down cities to force people out, and also of using rape as a tool, very much like in the former Yugoslavia. And so these are the difficult situations. Yes, there are people who are trying to kill soldiers from Myanmar. Yes, there are radicals among them, but most of the people are peaceful. Most of the people have lived there for their lives, and they just are not, they're just stateless because they are not allowed to become citizens of Myanmar.
Let me go back to Professor Nalapart. Kosovo eventually was able to win independence with the intervention of the European Union. Investigation was also conducted about ethnic cleansing in Srebrenica, in Serbia. The whole investigation ended up with Slobodan Milosevic being sent to The Hague, facing international trial over crimes, on charges of crimes against humanity. This time around, what do you think of what's happening in Myanmar? Do you think international society would step in? How do you look at the possibility that one day Rohingya might be able to enjoy a high degree of autonomy? I'm not talking about the Kurds in northern Iraq, but we can certainly associate these happenings in certain perspective. What do you think?
Well, I'd like to point out that a section of the international community based in the Middle East has been sending hundreds of millions of dollars worth of arms to a section of the Rohingya people, and this is leading to killing of Buddhists, killing of Hindus, and killing of moderate Muslims. So it is the most irresponsible thing to send money and to get weapons sent to this area. I'm sorry to say that those countries and those societies that are pointing a finger at Aung San Suu Kyi are not saying one word about this inflow of arms into the hands of a section of the Rohingya. The fact of the matter is very simple. If the countries in the Western world are talking in terms of the Rohingya, well, they have a very simple solution. They can accept the Rohingya into Europe. They can accept the Rohingya into North America, Canada, Australia, the United States, the European Union, the UK. All these countries can open their door to the Rohingya. They can do what they are prescribing for Myanmar. Let them put action before words.
Do you think, Professor Nalapart, that the laureate of the Nobel Peace Prize should be taken back by the international society from Madame Aung San Suu Kyi because of her silence?
Well, I'd like to point out that the LTT was finally eliminated because the then government in Sri Lanka, headed by President Rajapaksa, refused to listen to all the various countries and people who urged him to go slow on his war against the Tamil Tigers. Today Sri Lanka is a peaceful country, and today Sri Lanka does not have any acts of terror. Aung San Suu Kyi simply wants to do the same thing. And to talk about taking away the Nobel Peace Prize when the Nobel Peace Prize has gone to Henry Kissinger, who bombed Laos, who bombed Cambodia, who bombed Vietnam, who killed so many people. I mean, this is totally patently absurd and totally hypocritical. On the one hand, you have no problem with Henry Kissinger having the Nobel Prize, and then you blame Aung San Suu Kyi for wanting to keep her country united.
That's a good point. So what's the definition about terrorism?
Well,
I mean, this is a big question indeed.
It's a good,
very controversial.
Exactly, it's a good question. You know, this Arakan Rohingya Salvation Army, this is, you know, we are talking about, whether you call it a rebellion group, whether you call it insurgents within Myanmar, but for Myanmar government, they are a terrorist group. They launched the attack at the end of last month and also earlier this month. So not only security personnel, like 13 of them were killed during this short period of time, but also 21 civilians were killed, and also villages were set on fire. So basically, this is a very chaotic situation. You have government troops cracking down on this, whatever you call it, insurgent or terrorist group, and also you have civilians joining the government troops or joining these radical groups fighting each other. And probably they are setting fire on each other's homes. So this is, yes, if you look at the toll, the death toll, the majority of them are Rohingya people, and I think most people would agree with that. But still, a certain percentage of people are local Buddhist group of people.
What's the current relationship between the American government and Myanmar?
The American government has, I would call it a neutral relationship. It's not really ally, it's not enemy. During the period of Barack Obama, he actually went to Myanmar, the first American president.
But Obama naturally would definitely go there because
Right.
of the same title of Nobel Peace
He was,
Prize.
and he,
Yeah, he's the winner.
Well, and he was sending a message to Aung San Suu Kyi. But even in the Trump administration, the United States has laid back somewhat. You have not seen the criticism of Aung San Suu Kyi. I think I've heard much more come from Europe, much more come from Britain than from the United States. I think the United States would like to see less violence, but because of the war on terror, is not going to condemn the government of Myanmar and say you shouldn't fight terrorists. They will just call for moderation.
But what should be done next to bring an end to the mistrust and this around the violence? Question number 2 is, how would the international society respond to the crisis of humanitarian, disasters? Those refugees in their thousands definitely need humanitarian relief efforts.
That's for sure. I think the international community should focus on one hand, to provide this necessary material relief, materials to these refugees locating now mostly in Bangladesh. Bangladesh is facing this pressure, population pressure and economic pressure, and also sometimes security pressure. At the same time, I think ultimately it's a problem of Myanmar. They have to find a reconciliation process, basically, to bring the two people understand each other, building the trust.
I'm not sure about the collective attitude of ASEAN, the regional bloc. However, Malaysia seems to be one of the first countries that reached out to the victims of the current violence in Myanmar. They've sent tons of humanitarian food to Bangladesh to help and assist with those victims. What do you think of, what do you think should be the proper response from ASEAN?
Well, ASEAN needs to be involved. I understand why Malaysia did it. I understand why Indonesia
because
or
of
the
Muslims.
Philippines. Exactly. Malaysia, Indonesia do not want to see Islamic radicalism. They don't want to see mass burnings of villages, mass rapes being used as recruiting tools for people who will be terrorists in their own countries. Also, you have a almost completely Muslim country, Bangladesh, that is very poor, and Bangladesh can't afford to absorb the costs of the refugees. So the other countries nearby that have more in terms of the ability to pay really do need to step up. And it shouldn't just be the Muslim majority countries. This is a humanitarian disaster that transcends religion. The Pope spoke about this weekend, and I mean, he spoke very strongly, saying these people are not Christian, but it is our Christian duty to help them.
Professor Nalapad, the Rohingya army has called for a 1-month ceasefire with the Myanmar military, which was ruthlessly turned down. But what about the motorcade of humanitarian relief that needs to be delivered to the refugees? And do you think the United Nations Security Council should hold an emergency session and discuss an agenda about what should be done there?
Well, I'd like to point out one fact. There have been acts of terror in Europe, especially in Britain and France, and in the United States. I don't think there were any mass rapes or mass murders or mass killings in these countries. If they were, they don't seem to have come to the attention of media. But yet there have been acts of terror. Terror is a very complex issue. You can't really simplify it by saying, oh, it's a reaction. It's not a reaction. It's an action. And it's an action of a vicious ideology. I'm very proud to say that in my country, the Muslim community is a moderate community. It's a modern community. They welcome, for example, certain amendments to a situation in which a Muslim man could divorce a Muslim lady in 10 seconds. So our Muslim community is an example for the whole world, and specifically in Myanmar, the Rohingya themselves should take the initiative in identifying these extremist fighters, bringing them to book, and to ensure that this kind of activity does not go ahead in their name. They have to embrace modernism, they have to embrace moderation, and that's the only way you can solve this problem.
And do you think the UN Security Council should discuss the issue of economic sanctions against the government in Myanmar, which has actually been dominated by the military? If you look at the defiance of the military facing international crusade against the violence. And the next question, Nalapad, is one of the 4 major issues concerning the peace process in the Middle East is the return of the refugees, Palestinian refugees, to where they used to live. Now, of course, the refugees of the Palestine number, I mean, millions. It's obviously a difficult situation. But what about 300,000 refugees from Rohingya? Will they be able to be returned to their homeland after perhaps the intervention of the international society were to take place?
Well, I would like to say that those countries that are making a huge noise about the Rohingya should open their doors. It's only a few tens of thousands of refugees. The UK, for example, can easily accommodate them. France can accommodate them. I think Europe should basically, substitute action for words and invite the Rohingya into their own territories. I think that, that is exactly what needs to be done. Why are you putting all the onus on poor countries who have no money? You're rich countries, you have the money, you have the ability, and you have this enormous big heart that you're demonstrating by all this attack.
Oh, by the
on-
way,
on-
Germany
on
is
the-
home
on the-
to
on the Myanmar
1
government.
million.
As for the Security Council,
By the way, Germany is home to 1 million Muslim refugees.
well, I'd like to say I don't believe the Security Council should take up this kind of an issue. Wherever the Security Council has acted in this kind of ethnic way, it has created more problems, more bloodshed, as you're seeing in Libya, you're seeing in Syria, you're seeing in Iraq, you're seeing in Afghanistan. The record is horrible. I don't want to add Myanmar to that list.
But what can be done, Rick and Chindor, about the refugees?
I think refugees, if you look at the past and the flight of Rohingya people to Bangladesh, most of them have been actually repatriated back to Myanmar. But you have like several waves. This is the latest wave, the fourth wave of a flight of Rohingya people from Myanmar. And after they get resettled back in Myanmar, most of the time they're peaceful. Yes, there are some tension, but it's okay. The latest round of flare up basically from this attack launched by this group of people. They call it like Arakan Rohingya Salvation Army. Then there's a response, a strong response from the government. So there are a widespread problem. So ultimately, I think this is the issue of Myanmar. They should find a way. The government and the people should start this reconciliation process.
One of the major campaign pledges that Aung San Suu Kyi made in the process of elections was national reconciliation. However, it seems she has failed to honor the commitment. Now, it seems Myanmar, which is called a young democracy, has failed to fix all of those major issues, including the insurgency of militias in northern Myanmar that share the border with China. So, what do you think of the challenges, multiple challenges that Aung San Suu Kyi faces in inaugurating a serious process of national reconciliation and, of course, the reconstruction of the Myanmar economy?
Well, I would not yet call it a failed state or a failed democracy. I would not yet call her a failure. She's in a very difficult situation in that while she is the de facto leader of the government, the military has the power, and this is the military's war. Also, she is in favor of reconciliation, but a majority of people in Myanmar don't want to reconcile with this population. They want them gone. And so she has to use all of her skills to try to persuade people to accept having this population within their borders, even though they are not citizens of Myanmar. And also at the same time, she can't force the military's hand, which could lead to a military coup, and then you would be back to the situation of Myanmar and Burma before democratization.
So she got to weigh very carefully which is the lesser evil.
Well, exactly. And if she, for her party, you have to calculate the political prices. If you go against the popular will, you will face the vulnerability of being voted out. And also,
Are you talking about an invisible coalition between the military and the Buddhists?
I would the government more or less reflects the will of the people, including those probably quite nationalistic Buddhists in that country too. And Aung San Suu Kyi and her party, now in the ruling position, if they act against somehow being seen like against the national interests, they would be seen as like betraying this nation. That would be a disaster for the next election, right?
And Buddhists are no more the same than all Muslims. There are some radical Buddhists, there are some ultra-nationalists, but most of the Buddhists there are peaceful and welcoming. And so I think we really can't make it a pure religious issue. I think it more has to do with nationalism and ethnic identity than it does all Buddhists being the same.
Professor Nalapat, in your conclusion about our discussion, what do you make of the future of Myanmar? Will it continue to be a democracy that enjoys the blessing from Western nations, or will it be a failed economy, given the brutal fact that it doesn't have the social stability, which must be the precondition for whatever economic rebuilding or national reconciliation?
Well, we know Aung San Suu Kyi very well in India. She was living here for a long time, including in her young days. She's a woman of steel. She's got very strong principles. She's a very patriotic individual. And I am very certain that the resources that Myanmar has got, Myanmar will progress and go ahead. The problem is that the Rohingya community has to understand its enemy is not the Buddhist population. Its enemy is not the Hindus. Its enemy are the Wahhabis in their midst. And throughout the world, we have this problem. If you're looking, for example, at India, from 20 million, Muslims have peacefully developed to
Thank you so much.
168 million.